My name is Bernd Zakowski. My colleague here is Ian Wittenmeyer, and today we're going to tell you all about what you need to know about getting the most out of configurable apps. So we're going to begin by introducing configurable web apps. Now, the ArcGIS web map is a very fundamental building block of the WebGIS ecosystem. And I often say that at Esri, a web map is more than a map in the browser. It's actually a technical specification. So as Ian's team begins working on application templates, they need to know what a web map is, because these templates just support them. They just consume them inside the template. And likewise, if I'm a developer on the ArcGIS Pro team, I need to know about a web map as well, because I need not only to be able to publish them, but I also need to be able to consume them. So a web map is a fundamental building block of all of WebGIS. A web map is really interesting in that regard because you can author it once and you can use it anywhere, anytime, on any device, as we often say at Esri. So I use the map viewer to author the web map. I sometimes think we need to change the name of that and make that the map author, because that's really what you use it for. You use it to bring your layers together, symbolize them, configure your pop-ups, save the web map, and then when you share that, you can share that in a variety of different ways. That web map can be consumed in ArcGIS for desktop. It can be used in a variety of configurable applications that we'll cover here today. It can also be consumed in story maps and other Esri apps like Collector for ArcGIS, Explorer for ArcGIS, and others like that. So a web map is important. You build it once and you can use it in many, many different ways. Some of the applications are designed to leverage certain content that a web map might have in it. For example, an editable feature layer which would enable the application to help serve editing needs. So some of these applications aren't entirely generic. They're more focused on a workflow or a specific piece of functionality that you need to also enable in the web map or one of its layers. So Ian will talk a little bit more about that. But a web map really completes the user experience. Whether that experience is designed to serve the public or other people in your organization or decision makers, you take a web map that you've authored using all of your fine tradecraft regarding symbology and transparency, layer dependencies. Smart mapping really helps you make great web maps. Configuring the pop-ups is also a part of that. And then you couple that with an application template to complete the experience by creating a custom configured application. So there's no programming required. There is source code available. We'll cover a little bit of that later on. But for the most part, it's as simple as working through a series of checkboxes or input fields to custom configure the application to suit your needs. As Ian and I often say, a great app starts with a great map. So step number one is crafting that great web map. And the important things to consider here are some of the things that often get overlooked. For example, pop-ups are often overlooked. Rather than configure a pop-up, we often see a dump of GIS attributes, maybe with item names with underscores and all uppercase. It's so easy to create a much more meaningful pop-up, so that's always one of the things that we encourage you to do. Smart mapping, or using styles, has enabled you to create some really powerful looking web maps very easily. So that's made that process easier, but the whole focus here is on using the map viewer to authoring a great map that you're going to use in a great app ultimately. And the options of what you can do depend on what the layer is itself, what type of layer it is. Now, where do you find these apps that you can configure? There's a couple of different places, actually a handful of different places, where these can be discovered. Now, the place that we're focusing on today is the Create a New Web App Gallery. And this is built into the sharing workflow. So as you use the map viewer and author a map, you share it, and then you can enable a button which exposes the gallery, and then you just choose the web app from that gallery. If you're building story maps, there's another workflow that we'll recommend, which is starting off at the Story Maps website. You can also build story maps from the previous workflow, but the Story Maps website is actually a real good collection of resources focused specifically on leveraging those storytelling apps. But there's other places too. There are solution templates that are available at solutions.arcgis.com. These are configurable application templates that might require you to adopt a certain data schema. Because these application templates are not generic, they're designed to support specific workflows or tasks which may be unique to the domain that you're involved in, whether you're a utility or a local government or involved in defense. So these are kind of more focused solution templates that might require some specifics regarding the data that's available in the web map itself. And also throughout the ArcGIS ecosystem, you'll be able to discover these templates in items and groups. But the two primary ways are through the web app gallery and also the Story Maps website. Now, as we build applications, we want to ensure one thing, that those applications remain up and running. So we also want to make sure the application doesn't get deleted, but also any of the maps or layers that that application depends on don't get accidentally deleted during house cleaning. So in the item pages, in the general settings, there's a little checkbox. If you enable that checkbox, you can't accidentally delete it. It disables the delete button, and to enable the delete button, you have to edit the item information and uncheck that box. So that's a good practice that we highly recommend that will ensure that your applications keep on running. Next, I'll turn it over to Ian, and we'll go through that Mapcentric workflow. Ian.
Thanks, Bern. So we're going to look at that initial workflow of starting with a map inside of ArcGIS.com. This slide just kind of shows the workflow. I think it plays out a little bit better in a demo. The idea here is I created a map, I followed those best practices that Bernie talked about, and then at that point I'm ready to share that map with a larger audience, and I'm going to use one of these configurable apps to complete the user experience, or I guess a better way for me to think about it is to complete the information product, because each application has something different that it can provide to allow users to extract information from your map. So I'll hit share, create a web app, and then I'll be presented with the dialog. We've created, since last UC, we've done a lot of work to categorize all of the applications that we've provided. I think we have over 30 configurable apps built into ArcGIS Online right now. And in the past, we just kind of gave you a flat list to go through, and you sort of had to know which application you wanted to use, or you had to explore and play around with the different options. We still encourage that exploration and the prototyping of different apps, or taking a map and seeing what it looks like in different applications, but we've done a lot of work to create some categories that will help kind of refine the search for you. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So once you've chosen the app, in the map viewer you have three options. You can create the app, you can preview it, or you can download the source code. I think of this as in a slightly different way. I think of preview as you're going to get all the default settings. So preview is equivalent to defaults. Create a web app. That's going to allow you to do some configuration. So you'll be able to go beyond the default settings, but still within the realm of what's configurable. And then download is where you would take the source code and customize it. So that's extending what we've built beyond what's configurable. Most of the web applications have a common configuration experience where there's a series of tabs on the left that contain focused bits of information that you can turn on or off in the application. And they all include the ability to preview what you've built. So now I'm going to do a quick demonstration just to kind of show you those concepts in action. So I've made a map here, and as Bernie mentioned, even smart mapping can allow someone such as myself to make a halfway decent looking map. In this case I've used bivariate renderer to provide color based on a risk factor that I've calculated, size based on an income range, and then I've also used transparency. So the percentage of the population for these schools that's white is going to be covered by the transparency. Additionally, I've gone beyond the default pop-ups, so you're not going to see anything that's a database field in this information that's presented when you touch the feature. You're going to see some information that's specific about that school. It's going to be written in hopefully a way that's easier to understand, because I've taken the pop-up and I've created a custom pop-up that allows me to intersperse text with fields to create a more compelling bit of information. So once I've done this, I have my map. I'm happy with the way it looks. I'm going to create an application. I'm going to choose to share it. In this case, I'm going to share it with the public. I'll choose Create an App. And you can see on the left, I have some categories. We start by showing all. So if you're comfortable and you know which application to choose, you can browse through the all. You can also search based on name or, in some cases, other information like functionality. Or you can pick a category. In this case, I think I'm going to showcase a map. So these are really kind of minimal user interfaces that are really good at showcasing just the map and letting the map speak for itself. And I can go through here, touch the application thumbnail, and get a little bit of information. So in this case, I'm looking at the minimalist. It's a very, very basic application interface. I'm able to preview that and kind of see what the end result is. You can see here it's very, very little user interface. It's just map. So I think for my purposes, I don't want to go with that. I want to provide a little bit more information. So I'm going to go with the basic viewer. And in this case, I'm going to create the application. And as I mentioned earlier, this is going to allow me to go beyond the defaults and actually configure the application without writing any code. So I'm giving it some metadata. That's just the item name, some tags. Because I started with the map variable has already been populated. Let's see, I'm going to leave the title. I like the default title, which is the web map. I'm not going to change anything as far as the details, but I am going to make a change that I think is kind of a nice option. So on the General tab, I'm going to choose to show pop-up content in the side panel instead of over the map. When I turn that on, I'll save and kind of show you what the end result of that is. So when I touch one of these features, the pop-up is presented in this floating panel and off of the map. And we get questions all the time, how do I allow people to move the pop-up somewhere else? And this is one of the solutions that we've come up with in the short term, is to just kind of push that pop-up content into a fixed panel in the application. Some of the other things that I can change are the color scheme. I can add a splash screen and configure a button. So if you wanted to do something like add a disclaimer to your map and allow someone to agree to something, you could set this up to do that. We've also added some support for web accessibility. And one of the challenges with working towards being 508 compliant is really the map itself. How do you take a visual medium and provide the same information to someone who may be visually impaired? So one of the things that we've done with the basic viewer is we've improved support for keyboard navigation, so you can navigate through the application with the keyboard. And we've also added this configuration option called alternate map text. So this would be discoverable for someone who's using a screen reader, for example. This would be read to them when they tabbed into the map. So I think at that point, I'm pretty happy with the application. I think I'm just going to make that one change. And I'll just kind of show you the final result. So this is my default basic viewer. The only change that I've really made is taking that pop-up content and pushing it over into the side panel. And like I said, I think that's a nice alternate option because it lets the users view the map in its entirety, but also gain access to the information stored within the feature. I think with that, I will. Ready? With that, I'll turn it back over to Bernie, who's going to talk about story maps.
All right. So story maps are yet another configurable app. Actually, we think of these nowadays as builders. So we use a builder experience to create a story. And these are unique kinds of applications because they're designed not so much to support a workflow or not so much to support activities like some of the other configurable apps do. They're designed to tell stories. So they're specifically designed to incorporate lots of different types of media as well as maps into a configurable template that lets you tell a story about something. Now, a lot of these are kind of fun things or for public communication, but a lot of these are what I consider bread and butter activities. So lots of communities use story maps to tell the public about where their money is being spent on capital improvement projects, or they might be about how to find recycle centers and things like that. So story maps are of wide utility, whether you're trying to be entertaining and engage a more public audience, or whether you're building bread and butter applications that are used within your organization or even external, but that serve a particular purpose. The experience, though, is focused on telling a story. Each of these has a builder that's unique to the story map because each story map is different, and the builder guides you through the process. All of these, just like many of the configurable apps, are responsive, meaning that they'll fit a variety of different form factors. So as the space is constrained, elements of the application will shift around and fit the form factor at hand, whether it's a phone or whether it's a tablet. Story maps have their own website, which is focused specifically on storytelling, and it's pretty much everything that you need to understand about story maps as well as begin building them. There's actually a couple of different workflows. One might be considered an organization-centric workflow where you're working with my content in your ArcGIS organization. And then another workflow is you go to the Story Maps website and begin crafting your story maps from there. Both are equally good. The story maps does filter and focus on the story map building experience. Some of the popular story maps currently are MapTour, which was actually one of the original ones, and that's been around for many, many years. And it's sort of based on finding a sequential approach to finding things, so you can kind of navigate through a map sequentially. You can also explore interactively, but there's thumbnails along the bottom, and you can sort of visit those in sequence. Map Journal is a very, very popular one, and that's ideal when you have lots of different text and multimedia along with maps that you want to bring together. Map Series is another very popular one, and that comes in a variety of different layout options that you can choose. Again, this kind of works in a more of a sequential fashion. Most story maps provide different layout options for you to choose from. For example, in the story map series, I can choose from a bulleted layout where I have numbered bullets across the top. I can choose a tab layout where I have text of my choice appearing as tabs, or I can choose side accordion where everything is displayed from top to bottom and can also be numbered. So all of these are just a simple click away. So once you're working with the story map series, you can toggle any one of these layout options. And it's true for many of the story maps, you can just move from option to option. We have just recently introduced some new ones. The Cascade one is particularly compelling and is all of a sudden just a hot ticket item. And it was just introduced just about a week and a half ago. And it's also very popular, but beta right now. So it'll be finalized as soon as we complete some feedback and testing, but it's there for you to use. If you build a story map using any of these beta ones, it'll automatically roll over to the final version when that is released. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two workflows with story maps. One is you start with a web map, and the other is you start at the story maps website. And let's begin by starting with the web map first. Like Ian just showed, you craft your web map, you share it, you click Create a Web App, and one of the sections, one of the things that you can choose from is a topic called Build a Story Map. So they're organized uniquely within the Create a New Web App gallery. From there, once you click a story map, it starts up the builder experience, and it's just as if you started at the story maps website. So at that point, it's kind of where they connect together, and the experience is the same. The other workflow, which is the one that I would recommend if you're focused on building story maps, is to go to the Story Maps website and begin there. Why do I recommend that? It's because you can learn a lot more about story maps at that website, and there's also some really handy tools which are focused on story maps, which help you not only author them, but also gauge their health and what's going on. One of those tools is called My Stories. So this is like My Content, but is focused only on story maps. So it filters My Content for just your story maps, and it displays them. It has some unique capabilities, which we'll be bringing to the Configurable Apps, one of these releases, but it allows you to look at all of the components that your story map has been made. It actually checks them. It'll ping resources, make sure they're up and alive, and it'll let you know if there are issues or not. If there are issues, it'll explain to you what those issues are and enable you to rectify those issues. So if you're missing resources or if you need to authenticate some subscription content, all of that is kind of built into the experience. The Story Maps website also presents some interesting ways for you to discover the story map to use. One of those is a button called Create Story, which you'll find tucked away in various places. But if you just kind of hover over one of the thumbnails, it just gives you a one-sentence description of what that story map might do. So it helps you zero in. Another way is like a little wizard. It's called Ask the Pros. And you answer some questions. What do you want to do? You want to have a set of places, and then do you want to show photos for each location in this case? Do you want to click or do you want to scroll? You answer the questions, and then it comes up with a recommended story map that suits the story that you want. Let's just take a look and see how this works. And I'm going to begin by using the Mapcentric Workflow from my organization. So here is my ArcGIS organization. I've logged in already. And I'll go to My Content, and I'll look for a map that I want to use to build a story map with. And down here, I want to build a story map swipe. I already have a map, and it's a very, very simple map that I've authored. Didn't require much tradecraft at all. In fact, all I did is add one layer on top of a base map. My base map is the world topographic base map, and on top of that, I added a single imagery layer, which is a historic map from the David Rumsey collection, which you'll find on ArcGIS Online. So what I'd like to do is tell a story about the history of New York by leveraging these two layers. I've saved the map, and now I can share it. It's publicly shared already, which enables Create a Web App. It's the same process that Ian took, but instead of choosing one of the other categories, I'm going to build a story map, and I'll find the story map swipe available here in the lower right. We'll select it, and I'll create the web app. Now, this is the exact same process that Ian went through. I need to give it a new title. It's going to be creating a new item in My Content. So it's the New York City yesterday and today swipe is what I'm doing, and I click Done. This couples the map with the application template, and it launches the Story Map Builder experience. Each builder is a little bit different because each app is a little bit different. The default layout here is a vertical scroll bar, a vertical slider. I'll choose that. I can compare two maps, or I can compare a layer to other layers. It's already chosen my historic layer, since that's the only layer in my map. I'll just click Next. I don't have a description, no legend needed. There's no pop-ups here. So I'm pretty much done and can view the story map. So here's the little vertical slider, which lets me kind of slide through or swipe through the historic map and see the underlying topographic base map. Each story map does have different layout options. To change those, I can click on the Settings tab, and here I can choose from the swipe to the spyglass, click Apply, save my changes, refresh my browser, and we'll see that in just a couple of clicks I've turned this vertical swipe into a spyglass effect, which is kind of interesting. It allows me to use a little lens and move the lens around and look at one layer through the other. From here on, I might do some additional things, change the title. I could change color schemes. I would swap out the Esri logo for my organization logo and continue on from there. But this is the Mapcentric Workflow, and I've created a new item in my content. Let's take a look at a different workflow, and this workflow is supported through storymaps.arcgis.com. What's interesting about this site is it's all focused on story maps. So I can learn how to create story maps, I can look at the featured maps and become inspired by what others have done. If you were at the plenary yesterday and saw the Andrea Wolf presentation, the story map that she used, they were talking about the importance of Alexander von Humboldt, is here, and this is the new cascade. So as I'm using my mouse thumb wheel, or as I would swipe on my device, I'm kind of scrolling through things and seeing text and other things go by. So this is a really interesting application and very powerful. We're sure it will be very popular. But anyway, besides that, on the website, I have a gallery of different story maps that I can peruse, and they're organized by the story map type. So these are all ones that use Map Journal. Here's all ones that use Map Series. I simply click on the left and I look at the type, and I can kind of learn from others and see what they've done and adopt some of what they have done into my own story map creation. This is my stories, and this is that filter on my content which exposes just story maps. And just a second ago, I created this New York City Yesterday and Today story map application, and I'm filtering by date so that appears at the top. Earlier, I created another one during my session with Alan, and they're all listed here. So these are just my story maps. What's really cool about this is when I click on the title, it checks my story map, and it opens it up and basically pings everything I've used in there, and it tries to identify issues. And I think if I scroll down, I'll find some ones that I might have some issues in. Let's try this one. All right, so this one definitely has some issues in it. I'm using some subscription content, and it will tell me what that is, and it tells me what to do about those issues. So each of these has a little checker, very powerful feature, which lets me analyze the content and gives me a little health check on that. But I want to build another type of story map, so I'm going to go over here to Apps, and I want to build a map journal. And again, this is another place where I can browse them all. I can learn more, discover more about them, follow a tutorial even, which guides me all the steps to take these. But I'm going to go ahead and build one by launching the Map Journal Builder. So each builder is different. This one lets me choose a side panel or floating panel. I'll stick with the default. I need to give it a title, and I'm going to call this Ian Story. Have a main stage, a side panel, and I begin by authoring on the main stage. For this one, let's do something interesting here. So here's a little intro video, just a little kind of looping video. It's kind of nice. I would like to add this to my story map journal, and I'm going to add it as a web page because it's the video is actually controlled inside of a web page. So I paste that in there. I click Configure. I pick a position. In this case, I know this video looks good just using fill, and I click Next. Now I need to provide some text over here, and I've got some sample text. I'll just grab some of this, copy it, and oops, I think I blew it here. I actually kind of opened that up in the same browser, which was a fatal mistake for me. But we'll see if we can recover from that quickly. So let's go back here, main stage, side panel. Now I need to go grab my stream again. We'll grab that. We'll put that in the web page and configure that. And this time I'll take a little shortcut. I'll just add some nice little text here. Now there's lots of things that I can do here that I don't have time to cover in this session. I can highlight text, and I can create what's called a main stage action. It's like a link. And the different things I can do are from some text, I can open up a web map, an image, a video, or a web page. So these just appear as links in the side panel. The other thing I can do is I can incorporate other things into the side panel. For example, if I want to add a video or a picture or photo from any of these locations, I can do that. Let's quickly add an Esri video. So let's go to YouTube, Esri, and let's find a nice little video here. All right, looks like there's a UC video featured here. So let's go ahead and grab this. and we'll go back to my map journal, and we'll choose this from YouTube. We'll paste her in there, do a little check. Everything's good, so I can select this video. I'll make it fit inside the side panel, and we're pretty much well done. So now I've completed my story map with one section, and the process I would take would be to just continue on. I save the map, I can control the sharing, and I can preview it, and here's what we have. We have that nice little looping video that comes up. We have some text, which isn't well crafted at this point, but it's a start. And I've got a video that I can play inside my side panel. So from here, just in the interest of time, if I want to keep on going, I would just go back to the builder and go ahead and add a new section. And from here, I can do things like add a map. One thing I do want to show you is if you add maps, by default, you're searching all your content or all of ArcGIS Online. And you can see even in my content, I've got 11 pages of stuff. If you favorite a map, then you can kind of filter your search. So what I like to do is, if I know I'm building a story map, I'll favorite those things so they're more easy to find. By default, it uses the map extent. I can override that in the story map builder itself, so I can zoom in a little bit or move it and then save that location. I can even do some interesting things like have the pop-up open by default rather than expect the user to click on it. I can do that, and I can override layer visibility as well. So an interesting technique is I can use the same web map to tell my story and just toggle different layers off and on. And I need to give it a section title. I'll give it a title, click Next, and we'll add some more text over here and click Add. And now I have another section. If I save this and then view my story, I now have two sections in my story. Again, here's the opening one with the flowing water, and then my next section will see the map, and the pop-up will open automatically because that's the way I've configured it. Easy process. The builder is very powerful, and with that, I'm going to turn things back to Ian.
Thanks, Bern. So I'm going to be talking about apps for web scenes. So far, we've been strictly focusing on apps for web maps. In the demo for apps for web scenes, I'm going to show you a couple other places that you can explore what the capabilities and options are in online. So I think it was in the March release we added support for scenes that can for apps that can display web scenes. We have three options in the configurable apps. We have just a basic viewer for web scenes. We have a compare, and then we have one that does data visualization. So the best workflow for creating a web scene is from the item page of the web scene. That's the workflow that I'll be demoing in just a moment. We're working on creating apps from the scene viewer, but we just haven't had time to build that experience yet. But that's coming in the near future. So similar to the Mapcentric view, you're going to open up the gallery of applications. You're going to have three options. You're going to have the option to preview, the option to create a web app, and again, that's configuring, or you'll have the option to download. For the three scene-based apps that I'll be showing, the configuration experience is essentially the same as it was for the basic viewer. There's going to be some tabs on the left and some options that you can check on and off. So before I get into the demo of the scene viewer, the scene-based applications, we saw the Mapcentric workflow in ArcGIS Online. We saw the Mapcentric workflow from Story Maps. We also have, within the ArcGIS Online Esri featured content gallery, we have the ability to explore the suite of configurable apps. We also have built in that same filtering experience. So if you're overwhelmed by the large grid of options and you want just to look at a specific subset, you can browse them here. And then from here, you can also launch the application or view the item details. So if you wanted just to get an idea of what the application looked like, you can open it up here. So this one's called Live Maps. It's one of the newer beta applications that we've been working on. Currently, it supports Twitter, Flickr, and then also something called Sick Weather. So this will tell you, where in this area someone has reported having a cold or the flu. We're looking to add additional live feeds to this one in the future. But this gallery is a great place to go to and just kind of, similar to what Bernie said earlier, get inspired or at least see what the capabilities are of these different applications. So I'll just show you one more. So this one's an interactive filter. So it gives me the ability to create a set of options over here, and I can let the user change the values for my filter, and it'll change the features on the map. The other place that you can access this larger suite of configurable apps is from the My Content Create dialog. So I'll choose Create App using a template. And this will show me basically those same options as I saw in the gallery. The difference that you're going to see here and in the gallery from the map viewer is that in the map viewer, we're just going to show you applications that are based on a web map. In My Content and in that Esri featured content gallery, we're going to show you all the options. So those that take web maps, those that take web scenes, and those that take groups as input. So if you're looking for something in the map viewer that you think will solve your problem, if it's based on a group, it's not going to be exposed in the map viewer. The other thing that we've done since the last UC is we've added some help doc that kind of explains the process that you might take for approaching creating an application, and we kind of give a couple of considerations. The primary one is keeping in mind what the purpose of your application is, and then secondary to that is what is the functionality that I need to have to help me deliver the message or fulfill that purpose with my audience. So those are the other options that we have for seeing the entire suite of configurable apps within ArcGIS Online. So what I want to do next is a demo of creating an application from a web scene. On the way there, we're going to take a brief detour to the new item details page. So we've done a lot of work to refine this. This is a featured layer. It's just documenting historical volcanic eruptions. Because it's a hosted feature layer, I can view the attribute table in the data tab, so it'll give me all of the information here. I can do things like sort ascending, descending. I can also show the detail view, which gives a nice summary of the top values in the table. The other thing that's fairly handy, especially for something like this that I'm planning on putting in a web scene, is that I can configure my renderer and I can configure my pop-up for this layer within the visualization tab. So you can see if I bring up one of these pop-ups, this is a great example of what not to do for your pop-up. You can see there's a lot of I guess cryptic information in there, and it's just a list of attributes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure a custom attribute display, and I've written my expression already. So I'm just going to say, in the year, the name of the volcano produced a magnitude eruption, and it resulted in a certain number of deaths. Excuse me. So when I save that, it will hopefully have transformed my laundry list of data into a somewhat more useful package of information. So you can see it's created a sentence out of those fields that were stored in my database. The other thing that I can do here is change the style. Again, using smart mapping, I'm going to symbolize based on the volcanic eruption index. And I'm going to add a second variable. I'm going to do deaths. So I want to look at volcanic eruptions. That's going to be a color. So the darker the color, the higher the index. The larger the circle, the higher number of casualties. So now I'm fairly happy with the way that my layer looks. What I can do now is I can save this as a layer. Call it after. And then once I have this layer configured, I'll be able to add it either to the map viewer or in my case to the scene viewer. So I'll add it to the scene viewer. And then in the scene viewer, I have the ability to do a couple of somewhat interesting things. I'm going to, let's see. You can capture slides. So this area of Central America looks fairly interesting. There's a lot of there's a lot of large circles there. So I'm going to capture a slide. And let's see, where else could I go? I think Southeast Asia. Go this way. I'll capture a slide for Southeast Asia. And then I will let's capture one more slide. So once these slides are embedded in the scene and I've saved it, I'll be able to access those either from within the scene viewer. You can see the slide tray at the bottom. And I'll also be able to capture and access that information from the scene applications. So I'm going to save this scene. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to view the item details. So this will be the item details of the scene that I've just authored. From here, I can choose Create Web App. I'm going to choose using a template. And I'll be presented with the 3 applications that support web scenes. Same thing we did with the map viewer and the map-based workflow. I can select the option, I can preview it, and get an idea of what the application will look like. So in this case, it's going to use a point extrusion, and it will show the different fields and attributes that I've set up. And you can animate it to play through the attributes. The next one I'll show is called Compare Scenes. So this will let you compare up to 2 web scenes. Right now there's a limitation on that. By default, it's going to show me both, but it'll give you an idea of what the experience is like. We support having the scene navigation linked or unlinked. So I've just unlinked it, and I can navigate the scenes independently. If I link it again, then the scenes will be synchronized. Then the other option, which is I think what I'm going to proceed with, is the simple scene viewer. So in this case, I'm just going to choose Create Web App. Fill out the name for the new item. Click Done. It will take me into that kind of more common configuration experience. In this case, I have very few options because this application is very, very straightforward. It's going to take the scene that I just provided, and it's going to let me do a couple of things. So I can change the renderer. I can enable a layer list. I can add a subtitle if I'd like to. In this case, I think I'm just going to add, I'm going to change the color, and then we'll just take a look at this. Let me open the full application. So here you can see the scene that I authored previously. The layer list allows me to turn on and off the layer that's part of the map. And I also have access to those to the slides that I authored in the scene viewer. So you can use these slides to kind of craft your story, create a presentation to help users navigate through the web scene. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is just a brief introduction to Web App Builder for ArcGIS. So we've focused mainly on story maps and the configurable apps that are within ArcGIS Online. The main thing, if you're moving from configurable apps into the Web App Builder space to keep in mind, is the Web App Builder is really the easiest way to create your own custom template. So if you want to build something and allow other users in your organization to repeatedly create applications based on your own template, the Web App Builder is the easiest way to create that. So the workflow for interacting with the Web App Builder is fairly similar. You're going to click Share from the map viewer or create an app from from My Content, and then you'll have the option on a separate tab to choose Web App Builder. So there's no coding. These apps are responsively designed, and as I mentioned, it's the easiest way to make a template. The real difference between Web App Builder and the configurable apps is in Web App Builder allows you to create a custom application, whereas the configurable apps are built with a very focused purpose. So if that focused purpose is that you're looking for is possible in one of the configurable apps, then you should probably go that route. If the functionality or the behavior that you need is outside of one of the configurable apps, then I would recommend looking at Web App Builder as a second option. So just to kind of show the workflow briefly. So from My Content, I can choose Create App. This time I'll choose using a Web App Builder. When I launch it from My Content, I have the ability to choose 2D or 3D. If you launch from the map viewer, you're only going to have the 2D option. I'm going to give it a name. This will be a 2D application. I'm not going to go into any real detail for configuring this. I just want to show the process for creating a template from the Web App Builder. So I'll select a theme. Go with the Dart theme. I'm going to choose a map. Actually, I'll go with the map that's already in there. And then I can configure the application. I can save it. So at this point, I've created an application using this map. The next step is I have this ability to export as a template. So what that will do is it will create a new item that has this set of configurable parameters exposed. So this is how I could then let someone else build the same application with their own map. Once I export it, I already used the title. Okay. So this message is telling me that the template has been successfully exported, but that my organization has not been configured to be able to consume that. So I won't go through the whole configuration process, but if you're an administrator, there are some settings in the organizations page that will allow you to, I've never seen that error before, interesting. So there are settings in the organization page that will let you configure the organization to expose that custom application that I've just created. I think with that, I will turn it over to Bernie.
All right, so we'll take off from where Ian left off. We'll talk about more things that you can do using the applications that we've been working with. One of the really interesting things that you can do is you can embed not just maps, but you can embed the configurable applications as well as story maps. And a popular kind of idea these days is to embed story maps in other story maps and other apps in story maps. And we'll take a look at this whole embed process and some of the things that you might be able to do with that. So one of the really interesting parts of the web map experience is that when you click share, one of the options is that you can...
Oh, sorry.
Let's go back.
I thought I already had done that. Thank
All
you.
right, so we're going to talk about embedding maps, apps, and story maps. So when you click that share button, there's another button that will be enabled as well depending on how you share it, and that is the Embed in Website button. So before, what we were clicking was the Create a New Web App button, and now we're going to click Embed in Website, and you're presented with a dialog. that enables you to configure what an embedded map might look like. So you can choose the buttons, the tools that might be exposed on it. You can choose things like whether to add a scale bar, whether to add a base map selector, and other things. And what happens is there is HTML that's automatically generated based on what you've chosen. You simply copy that and paste it into your website. You can also copy that and paste it into a story map, which is also an interesting thing to do. But that's one of the neat things about the web map is not only do you have these great web applications that are configurable, but you can almost kind of create a custom web application in a sense by leveraging these different embed options which are presented in this dialog. The HTML is generated automatically based on your chosen options, and all you need to do is just grab that line, just click the copy button, and then paste it into your website, and then whatever options that you've chosen will be in that embedded web map. And these web maps can be put into fixed width websites as well as responsive websites, and they work equally well either way, and all this is designed to support both responsive and fixed design. Now, switching gears here for a second, if we create a web application, whether it's a story map or one of the other configurable apps, we can also embed the entire application in the website. And it's very easily done using an HTML attribute called iframe. And you can do a search for iframe, and you'll find everything that you need to know. The W3C Schools has a great little tutorial on this. But the key parts of the iframe are highlighted there in yellow. Now, one of them is the width parameters, and the other is what do you want to display inside this iframe. Now, the width parameter there above that I've highlighted in yellow shows a width of 100%, meaning that we're going to be putting this into a responsive web page, so we want the width to automatically change as the web page is dragged out. The height is fixed, and then the other highlighted yellow is just the URL to the story map. So you just grab the URL, drop it in the iframe, and you're good to go. Now, there's some special capabilities that applications include that enable better embedding. And an example I'm going to show you here is a story map. And this is the one that we created earlier. We used the story map Swipe and Spyglass. This is a little different topic. This is about Chicago, and this is that Spyglass layout. Now, there's an inline URL parameter that I can add called &embed. And when I do that, the title disappears, the subtitle disappears, the social media buttons, the icon disappears, and all I have is just the meat, the heart of the application itself. So this is really, I'm sorry? Is there a question? Well, we'll step you through this and show you how this is done. But the tag is &embed, and all you need to do is add it after the URL. There's also similar minimalization capabilities which are available when you use 3D scenes. We haven't quite standardized on the exact URL parameters, so for 3D scenes they're a little bit different, but I'll show you how this works. This is a 3D scene opened in the scene viewer, and it'll take a second here for the buildings and things to pop up, but they'll start populating here in the moment. But you can see we've got layer controls, I've got a base map control. These things might be undesirable if I just want to embed the scene into my website or into maybe another application. And in this case, the URL parameter is &UI = min. I just type that in there, and it gets rid of a lot of those user controls. The table of contents is no longer there. Some of the base map selector, that's not there. And when this thing pops into place here, we're on the public network, as is everybody else at the conference. There's my 3D buildings. They pop into place. I have a minimalized user experience. Now, when I hover over this, it'll still reveal certain elements of the UX. So, for example, I still have the slides that I can toggle, and I can view different things using the slides. I get a title, and I have the zoom in and zoom out tools. But it's definitely a minimized user experience from the default one in the scene viewer. Let's go back to our slides and take a look at that in a little more detail. All right, so that was using ampersand embed. So if your question was, what do you add? It's ampersand embed. And there's blog posts which cover this. For scenes, it's ampersand UI equal min. You just add that to the end of the URL. It's an inline URL parameter, and it just minimizes the user experience, which makes it better for embedding. So let's take a look at all the different permutations that we can do by embedding things. And let me do a little bit of cleanup here. And we'll begin by, let's embed something in this web page. Now, this is a fixed width web page, very simple. And I don't have anything interesting there to display. But what I'd like to do is add this map to my web page. This happens to be part of an analysis for cougar habitat, and let's just go ahead and turn on one more layer. Let's look at vegetation or slope. Look at slope. We'll add that layer to my map, and we'll go ahead and save my changes. Now that I've finalized my map, I can click Share, and I've decided to make this public, and the button that we'll choose in this case is Embed in Website. When I click the button, I have a little diagram here on the right, which gives me an indication of what I'm adding to my map. So, for example, if I click a home button, you saw a little button appear on that little icon. If I want a base map selector, oh, that appears. I've got a couple of different base map options which are interesting. One is a base map toggle, which lets me just choose one different base map. So we'll allow a switch from the topographic base map to the imagery base map, and that's it. And you get the idea. I just choose the different options that I would like. Let's go ahead and add a legend, and then I just copy this. So I've copied this to my clipboard, and now I'd like to paste it into this website. So let's take a look at how we do that. So I'm running off of my own local host, which means that I have IIS installed on my laptop, so I can begin to work with these things and I can test them locally. And this is what we do before we move to production mode, where I'd expose this. So let's edit the HTML for that website. And here we are. I've already actually kind of stubbed out another example here, but let's just go ahead and take what I've pasted. There's the top of the web page, and here's the Latin there, the placeholder text, and I'll just paste that directly in here. And it looks kind of complicated, but you really don't even need to worry about that. If you're a HTML or CSS expert, you can even modify some things in line, and you might want to do that. But at this point, I'm just going to save my changes, and we'll go back to my web page, and we'll refresh it, and we'll see what we have. And indeed, what I've managed to do is I managed to embed that cougar map that as we saved it, and it has the controls that I enabled. For example, up here I've got a legend, because that was one of the options I toggled on, so I left that on, and I have a base map selector, which just is a simple selector, which lets me toggle just between two different base maps. So it's very easy to embed these things into any web page, and there's lots of different options that you can explore. And let me go back to Notepad here, and let's get rid of that. And we'll save that again so we can move on to the next thing we want to show. So once again, I'll make the edit, I'll save it, and I'll refresh a little sample website, and we're back to where we began. All right, let's consider some other things here now. So let's go back to my water and climate resilience application. And pardon me, while Ian was doing some demonstrating, I was hard at work fixing up this application because I was despondent about the miserable state that I'd left it in. So I made it a much better application by adding some proper text and things like that. And the way I did that was I just edited, click the pencil icon, and then kind of added some text. And here's that video that we added earlier, but I just made this a little bit nicer. So that's a much better introduction. On the second panel, I also added some text, and I did want to show how the links work. So here's a keyword watershed, and I'll select that, and I want that to trigger a main stage action. I want to switch the map that's there and switch it to a different map. So this is enabled now, and I am going to select a map, and I'm going to choose my watershed map, and we can override some things. In this case, let's override some of the content. So by default, these three things are on. Let's get rid of that P for the pour point and just save the map content. So Story Map Builder allows you to override the defaults that are saved in the web map. And let's click Apply, and let's click Save. So now, let's start at the top of the web map. I go to the top, and there's my home page. I've got the little video that we can play that we added earlier. And I move to the next section, and there's my web map with the pop-up that automatically opens. Now I have a little link here called Watershed, and when I click that link, it changes the main stage content. And now I'm exploring a different map, and to go back to the original map, I click the map button. So we can toggle between maps, we can toggle videos, we can toggle web pages. You can control what happens on the main stage by using this handy technique. Now what I want to do is I want to do something a little more interesting. I want to embed a story map inside of this story map. And let's take a look at how to do that. Here's a story map that I want to embed. So let's grab that URL, and let's go back to this map, and let's add a new section. And this will be, I'll just title this story map here. And in this case, I want to add that story map. And the way I do that is not by choosing a map. I'm going to add it by clicking Web Page, because really that's what it is. It's a web app that opens up in a web page. So I'll paste that in there, click Configure. I know that story maps are responsive, so I can let it fill the entire main stage, which is a default, and I'll click Next. And here's where I will add some additional text. I won't take the time to do that, but we will add the section. So here's what we have. We have our story map, our little spyglass, now embedded inside of this story map journal, and it's pretty neat. Now, I can see an improvement I can make here. I've got lots of room for text over here on the left, so I really don't need this title. I don't need the subtitle. I may not want the Esri logo, and I don't want people to exit my story map to go out on the social media. So let's make a modification here. So let's go back to the main stage and go back to that URL and add in that parameter &embed. Once again, I click Configure, click Save, and now I have a much better example of an embedded story map within a story map, because I've removed the title and I just have the heart of the functionality of the story map embedded here. So that's how you can do that. You can embed any configurable application in a story map. And let's take a look at an example of one of those. We'll go to the gallery. And this is a story map that I've kind of towed along for quite some time. It tells a story about how white nose syndrome is killing bats. It started back in 2006, and it's been spreading across the US. So I wanted to show an animation of the spread. And I had a layer that was time-stamped, and all right, we'll ignore that and hope that I haven't lost the internet connection here. So what I did was I used the time-aware configurable application template, which is embedded here on the main stage. And this is an awesome template if you have time-aware data, because it allows you to animate through time, and it uses a really kind of nice little fade effect. So in this case, I wanted to show the spread of this disease across the US over time. So I embedded the time-aware application. So I authored that, configured it, grabbed the URL, and then added it as a web page into the story map journal. The other thing that I've done here is I wanted to show how this affected different species and their species habitat ranges. So I've embedded another story map. This is a story map series using the tabbed layout. I've embedded that onto the main stage here, and now I can look at each of the ranges of each of these species and look at that, and I brought that all into one section here. Now again, I've used that &embed to minimize the user experience of this application. And let's take this another step further. Let's take this entire story map and let's go ahead and embed this into my web page. And this will be, I think, the grand finale if I manage to pull this off. So, all right, I've got the URL, and I'm going to cheat here a little bit. I already have a little stub iframe, and you can see I've set it for fixed width of 900, which I know is my web page here, and I'm setting the fixed height here. And I'm just going to grab this URL, select it, and replace it with that white nose syndrome one. And we'll go ahead and save. Now let's go back to my website, and we'll refresh it. And
I think you have to uncomment that block of code.
oh, thank you. Ian reminded me that I've still got the code commented. So, all right, obviously got to remove the comments, otherwise nothing will work. And thank you for that. And now we'll save it again and refresh, and voila, I now have a story map. And I blew it here somewhere. Did I really? I accidentally erased the quote. Okay, so let's take a look at that. And thank you for paying attention. And let's see, where is that? It's probably right here, right? That's the end of the quote. And now, let's see if we fix this with audience participation. And hooray, we've done it. Now it's responsive, so things have shifted just a little bit. I actually used the wrong URL. I used the URL under which I own this, so I get the edit button here. So I would use the generic URL. And what that means is I would change this to www.arcgis.com.
I think if you weren't signed in.
If I wasn't signed in, that wouldn't be there. But I am signed in, so I can use a generic URL there too. But basically, I've embedded it. And what's really interesting is that I've embedded a story map that contains embedded apps and embedded story maps as well. And everything just kind of fits in really nicely into this environment. Now, because of my constrained space, this story map tab has actually shifted into responsive mode. So instead of seeing the tabs across the top, because there wasn't enough space in my fixed width website, it actually shows the tabs now here along the bottom. So it's really kind of neat and interesting and powerful how all these things kind of come together and just work together pretty well. And with that, we'll turn it back to Ian.
Okay, the last thing that we were going to talk about, and I'll be brief, app source code. So we saw in a couple of the demos that there's the option to download the application source code from GitHub. So you can either download it from GitHub as a zip file, or you can copy the repository. So any of the applications can be customized beyond what we've provided. There's one bit of information. For most of the applications, you're going to want to know the web map ID. That's going to be the way that you tell that the application that you've downloaded what map to use. The only caveat to that is in situations like we just saw with Bernie's demo, where he's got an application that has, I don't know, 50 maps, maybe less than that. It has multiple maps, multiple apps. Instead of using the web map ID, you're going to want that app ID. So that ID for the web map, that ID for the web app, that's going to act as its essentially social security number. So that's the unique identifier within ArcGIS Online for that resource. So in the code, you could, if it's a single map application, you could provide the map ID. If it's a multi-map application, you could provide the app ID instead. You could also provide the app ID if it's a single map application and you're happy with the way that it's been configured in online, but you want to just change something, say in the CSS presentation layer of the application. You could reference the app ID, and that will bring in all of the maps, all of the other settings that you've configured as far as tools, and then allow you to change that with your code. So I won't demonstrate that since we're a little bit long. So I think with that, we'll open it up for questions.
And I think we also are to remind you that there is an online survey, and you should go ahead and fill that out. There's a little app that you can use to do the online survey for that. So we're happy to entertain any questions. If you want to leave, thanks for coming with us. Yes, ma'am. Could you ask that question one more time?
So the question was, when you're creating a scene and authoring slides, can you configure a pop-up? I think we saw that in the demo, but I think I accidentally triggered the clicking of the mouse on the feature. So I don't think that's not possible right now.
So I think what you want to do is you want to have a pop-up on a scene automatically appear. Is that right? Just like in a web map. And I don't believe that that is possible just yet.
Double-check.
So the scene viewer and the map viewer have some differences, and that's actually a really good enhancement request. We can take a look at doing that.
Let's see.
You can embed all sorts of other things too, like a presentation. Yes, a web map. The question was, can I pop up text in the web map presentation? And if you just want to toggle me over here for just a second.
I think, so there's a couple of things. I think in Map Journal, you can configure it to pop up like Bernie showed. And there's a couple of applications that you can pass in using a custom URL parameter, a attribute name, and it'll pop up basically when the application loads, it'll navigate to that feature and pop up the search result window, but that's not exactly the same as the attribute inspector pop-up. So I don't think that what you're looking for is possible outside of Map Journal.
But for a presentation, you can include a pop-up. So every web map has a presentation capability. If it doesn't already have one, you'll see a Create Presentation link here. This is Edit Presentation, because I've already started one. And the way the presentation works are you go ahead and you add a slide, you give it a title, and then you can do things like set the location, set to current. I'm going to click on the map to include a pop-up, and then I'll go ahead and persist that by checking the box, and then we're good to go here. So if I go ahead and save that, and we play that presentation, when we get to that final slide, I'm just going to shortcut and go to the final slide. Oops, I've got it looping here. The pop-up will open, and I've got to set the auto loop too, so I apologize, and I have to wait for it to auto loop here. So the pop-up will open like it is here. So here's some other slides where I've enabled the pop-up to open automatically, and I'm looping pretty quickly here, but you can't persist the pop-up in a presentation. This whole presentation, I can grab that URL and I can embed it in a story map just the same way that I embed anything else, using it as a web page and then configuring it to fit and so forth. Any other questions? There are a couple of different blog resources that you can go to. In ArcGIS Online, if you go to the help, and this is a newly redesigned as well, and you scroll down just a little bit, here's Read Our Blog. And if you click More Blog Posts, you will have the entire blog roll of everything about different ArcGIS products. You can look over on the right-hand side, and you can kind of refine that by clicking a category, or you can type in a keyword and look for a specific topic, like embedding. So I type that keyword, and I'll find all things that match that, and then I can go ahead and discover that blog post. On the StoryMaps website, there actually is a separate roll-up for that, and if you go to the blog, this automatically filters for all the blog posts that pertain to StoryMaps. So there's two ways for you to find those additional bits of information that will help you succeed. In the back. Okay, so ampersand UI equals min is what you use when you want to embed a web scene. And any web scene can be minimized. You can minimize the user experience using that. And all you need to do is open up the web scene and append at the end of the web scene ampersand UI equals min. Now, it's kind of confusing to remember how to do all of these things. So what we're trying to do is, over the long haul, is just standardize on that URL parameter that enables you to do that. So here's a standard web scene, and it's got all the controls, layer controls, and everything else, and all I need to do is use ampersand UI equal min for the web scene, and that's what does it for web scenes. Any other questions? Okay, Ian and I will be, when we're available, we'll be in the showcase area. Our colleagues and teammates will be down there. If you have any configurable app questions, please feel free to stop down in the pavilion. I think that's the proper name for it this year, not the showcase.
I'm good.
And there's tons of people there that can help you. We'd be really happy to sit down with you and work through these workflows if you need some help. And we're also available via email post-conference. So let us know what you're up to, and we're happy to help. What we'll be doing is questions that you ask us, we'll be looking to turn those in the blog post, so your questions will help others as well. So thanks for coming. Enjoy the conference.
Thanks.